The next step in this understanding of the teachings of the Buddha is what is called the hindrances, or the clouds or obscurations that come to the natural mind. The mind in its true state, or the heart in its true state, is naturally luminous. Luminous is this heart-mind, brightly shining, says the Buddha. But it becomes colored by the attachments or entanglements that visit it. This unlearned people do not really understand, and so they do not cultivate the freedom of mind. Luminous is this heart-mind, brilliantly shining, when it is free from the attachments that visit it. This the follower of the way truly understands, and so for them there comes cultivation and awakening and freedom of mind. I'd like to speak about the entanglements, the clouds, the projections and imaginations that catch us up, the contractions that come to us. In describing inner experience so that freedom could be discovered by practitioners, the Buddha picked in particular 5 very common entanglements or difficulties that would come as one simply sat down to begin to pay attention to one's life. In this stillness, feeling the breath and body as we do, there will arise grasping, wanting, different kinds, desire. And thus the yogi or meditator must know this is the mind filled with desire or wanting. Similarly, there will arise aversion and anger. And thus the meditator must recognize this is the mind of aversion or anger. Similarly, there will arise sloth and sleepiness. Thus the meditator must notice this is the state of sleepiness. Or restlessness will arise, and worry, or doubt may arise. And each time the instruction is to know when these states arise, to know when they pass away, to know the mind that is entangled by them, know the mind or heart when it is free from them. This is the text. It's really a teaching about how to work with the mind. And it's like this friend of mine in the monastery where I lived, who was always complaining about the noises people were making. He wanted it absolutely silent, and sometimes a car would come in and deliver food or gifts for the monks, or people would be talking, parties of visitors would come, and he would be always complaining about the noise and trying to sit there and meditate, and the noise would be bothering him. And finally we were all sitting around together with the teacher, and he said, "You keep complaining about these things bothering you. What I want to know is who's bothering whom. There are those sounds, and they're just the sounds. Who is bothering whom?" What's most important is to recognize that we cannot have a life that is free of suffering and difficulty. It's built into the nature of life. So what we want to do is to make use of what's difficult, to find the wisdom or compassion or freedom in the midst of the difficulties of life. And as we do, we begin to pay attention to some of the most powerful forces that run the world. And let me ask, how many of you know in your experience judgment? How many of you wrestle with fear, or wanting, or doubt? How much does the world wrestle with these? And when we identify or get entangled with these forces, they keep us from the reality of this present moment. They keep the heart from being open and the mind from being clear. So the examples that the Buddha chose to elaborate this teaching and technology are wanting, the wanting mind, or anger and judgment, the judgmental mind, fear, sloth and laziness, restlessness and doubt. And let me take them one at a time and describe the states that arise commonly in our meditation, in our relationships, in our work, in our lives, and the way that one might work with them, with the principles of the path of practice. The wanting mind. This is the state that comes in a moment. Here we are sitting quietly or having our cappuccino in the morning, in the cafe or whatever our work is, and all of a sudden there arises the state that whatever we have is not enough. It's longing, wanting, desire, greed, need. And each time it comes, it takes us out of the moment and says, get that. You want to have that. Or it blinds us. We start to look for that. If you're hungry and you walk down the street, what do you see? Restaurants. Oh, there's a Thai restaurant. I could have Thai food. Oh, but there's a really nice French restaurant over there. That Greek restaurant, I never tried that. You don't see shoe stores, do you? When you're hungry, you see restaurants. So it kind of puts blinders on us. It's like the teaching in India that when a pickpocket meets a saint, the pickpocket sees only the saint's pockets and nothing else. Now the wanting mind, or the mind of desire, it's not to say that all desire is unhealthy. There could be healthy desires or intention. There's a kind of will, neutral energy in Buddhist psychology called the will to do, cetana, that can be associated with compassion or awakening or mindfulness or wisdom. But this is the if-only mind. It comes and taps you on the shoulder in a moment, and it says, if only you had this, then everything would be fine. Come and get this thing, because what you have is not enough. Do you know this mind? It comes, and you have all this stuff, and it says, well, one more, this will do it. Or you get that, and then it says, well, just one more thing I forgot to mention. It's the mind that's not able to be where we are, because it's entangled in the belief that some other experience, some other sight or sound or taste or smell is going to make you complete. And all there is seeing and hearing and smelling and tasting the same thing again and again. You think one set's going to make you more complete than another. Last year, during the play that the family program puts on in May for the Buddha's enlightenment, Buddha's birthday, the children were out there playing the life of the Buddha, and one of the children in the community was the Buddha. And then Mara, who is the god of temptation and evil and all these things in the Buddhist mythology, Mara came out to tempt the Buddha under the Bodhi tree. And in this case, of course, we were quite fortunate in that a good friend of the community, Wavy Gravy, came down to play Mara. So Wavy came out as Mara and went over to the Buddha, and he said, Swiss bank accounts. How about your own multinational, primetime television show? What would you like? And he was just spinning off all the fantasies of things. But it's not just that. If only we had a little more money, or a different place to live, or that person that we know is someplace out there, that if only we could find them, our soulmate, and they would always love us just the way we are. It taps us on the shoulder and says, this life, this moment isn't full. Some other moment will do it. And sometimes it's just a small thing. Like, I remember being in the monastery, we couldn't have much, but this monk, a couple of cottages away, had this really beautiful begging bowl. Mine was kind of old and funky. And I just noticed that, well, wouldn't it be nice to get a begging bowl like that? It doesn't matter. You can be in prison if only the window could open a little bit more. It's the smallest things. So it's the things that we imagine, if only we could get that, then things would be better. But it's not always that way, is it? We strive and we try to get more and more and more, and pretty soon we just get exhausted from doing that. Or there's this hole inside that no matter what we get, if we don't love ourselves, we get this and this and this, and have all that, and we're still miserable. So how to work with this? How to understand it? On retreats, we have this wonderful phenomena we call vipassana romance, where you're sitting in silence for 10 days, and somebody you notice them in the corner of your eye, and they look interesting, and you're just meditating, but you think what fun it would be to maybe get to know them and meditate together after the retreat, or something like that. And pretty soon you're sitting there and just meditating away, and it takes over, and you notice them everywhere, and then the fantasies, and you imagine, getting together, and then there's marriage and children and the whole thing. Divorce, if you really play it out in your mind, And you've never even talked to this person. So the question is how to work with this wanting mind. William Blake put it this way. He said, "Those who enter the gates of heaven are not those who have no passion or who have curbed the passions, but those who have cultivated an understanding of them." To enter the gates of heaven, we need to know where heaven is, which is here, and what brings it alive. So these are very powerful forces when we get caught up in them. And in the world, greed and grasping and wanting more is a huge engine. And look at our society, look at advertising, look at its power. So how do we work with this? The first step is to accept it, to bring an awareness that's gracious and interested, and see these states, whatever they are, for what they are. That means that they're part of the landscape of our life. And we don't want to, on one side, suppress them, because when you suppress this stuff, it just comes out someplace else. It makes a kind of armor. The danger is not that the soul should doubt whether there is any bread, but that by a lie it should persuade itself that it is not hungry. So we don't want to pretend that we don't have longings or needs or desires. Oh, I don't want anything. That just cuts you off from yourself. The suppression on one side. The opposite side is acting things out. Well, every time a desire comes, try and fulfill it. Mostly what will happen is you'll get tired and then in trouble, or in trouble and then tired, depending which ones you act out. So we simply want to begin to study the force in ourselves. And then it arises, like Mara came to the Buddha, and the Buddha said, "Oh, Mara, are you back again? I know you. Here it is again. Wow, this is a really big desire, or that's a little desire. This is the heart that's hungry, or the body." And it helps to have a little humor because it's part of our life. As Mae West said at one point, when forced to pick between two evils, I always incline to choosing the one I haven't tried yet. Right? So the first thing is just to notice it's here. Here's this wanting or this hoping or this longing. Then the second is to bring it into the mindful heart, to receive it with mindfulness. This is the vehicle for freedom. And you can name it wanting or longing or desire. And feel it. How does it feel in the body? The tongue or the heart or the belly, or what does it do in the body? What is it like in the heart? What does it do to the heart? What does it feel like in the mind? To begin to know the power of this particular energy, receiving it with mindfulness, you can name it softly. Wanting, 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 desire, desire. And as you do, give it space, see what it does. It's like the weather. Not to be afraid of it or try to push it away, but feel into the center of it and know, what is this force? And is it possible to be present with it without reacting, acting it out, or suppressing it, until I know what's the right thing to do with it? And then even if it's very strong, you become mindful of it, then you want to soften the heart and the body. And really pay attention as if you could listen to its story. What does it tell you? Oh, if only I had this. Or you never got enough. You weren't fed enough. You weren't loved enough. Because the resistance to it makes it worse. You know how that is. Instead, you want to give it space just to do its dance and show itself with acceptance. So this is part of the power of receiving what's so with a mindful heart. To soften the heart and body when it's strong, listen to its story, bow to it like a cloud. Ask it a question. Ask your heart more deeply. Is this really true? Is this longing, this wanting, is this really what I want? What does the heart really want? We've lost in our busyness sometimes the graciousness of life. Wendell Berry writes, "When despair for the world grows in me and I wake in the night at the least sound, in fear of what my life, my children's lives may be, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water, and the great heron feeds, and I come into the peace of wild things. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting with their light, and for a time I rest in the grace of the world and am free. And that's really the freedom of the heart that says, oh, here's wanting again, or here's longing or need, to know it for what it is and hold it with compassion and understand that what we long for can never be gotten by those things, but really comes from the blessings of our own love. So there's a graciousness to this, working with these energies. The wanting mind's the first one, to know it. Then the second is its opposite, aversion, anger. And the same strategy, first, is to see it, to know it for what it is when it comes into the experience of our life. It's actually a little easier to work with anger and judgment than wanting, because the pain of it is more obvious. The pain in wanting is a little bit more subtle. You have to listen deeply to feel how much it keeps you from being here with the person in front of you or the trees in the springtime, all that wanting. But the pain of anger is more obvious. Irritation, judgment, condemnation. But fear is another form of aversion. I don't want to feel this. Or boredom. I don't like this. And you can see it all the time. It arises when there's a traffic jam, and there you're stuck on your way to this appointment, and it's just how it is, and the irritation comes. Or when you're ignored, or you feel betrayed by your boss or somebody at work. Or just you're tired and overworked, and so is your partner or your lover or this person that you live with. And they judge you and you judge them, and you're not there for one another the way you want. Or the kids are fighting, or the dog did it on the carpet again, or the daycare place changed its schedule and it wasn't what you needed for that week. And then we get angry or irritated, or aversion comes, or judgment. And we think about how it should be and how unfair it is that God has made the world the way it is. As Gore Vidal wrote, there is no human problem that could not be solved if people would simply do as I advise. So how to work with this force? With anger and aggression and fear? Again, the first step in this process is to receive it with mindfulness, to note it, to study it or receive it from the heart. How does it feel? Feel the temperature of the body, the pain in the body from it, the tension. Hear the story it tells, this, and they did, and she did, and he did. And if you listen to its story, often what's present isn't the anger at all if you listen deeply. But it's the fear that makes you angry. I'm afraid of this and that. Or it's the hurt that happened. I was hurt in this or that way, and I don't want it to happen again. And then this whole well of anger will arise. My teacher Ajahn Chah used to say, when monks were angry in the hot season, go in your little tin roof hut, wrap yourself in all your robes, sit down right in the middle of your anger, and really learn about it. Learn what this state is like and what it can do. Don't run away from it. This is from the Upanishads. Go ahead, light your candles and burn your incense and ring your bells and call out to God. But watch out, because God will come and He will put you on His anvil and fire up His forge and beat you until He turns brass into pure gold. So it's not that these are bad things or something that, is not right. These are very powerful forces in our life. And what are we going to do with them is the question. Can somebody in this earth learn to live peacefully, learn compassion, learn not to fight and create the wars that are in so many countries? And the person who has to do that? Moi. And you, each of us, to learn this. So it comes in what do we do? Begin simply by naming it, anger, or judging, or rage, and to feel it and feel its force, and make the spaciousness of heart and the compassion big enough to allow it, to give it its respect, but not necessarily to believe its story. To feel the fear or the hurt that's underneath it, and when it's time to give a voice, to speak from that deeper place. The same is true with fear. You sit there and meditate, or you're at work and there's some difficulty that comes and you think, I can never do it. And fear arises, terrible fear, and you just begin to settle back and you say, oh, this is fear. Fear, fear, oh, this is so difficult, I'm so afraid, 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 and you name it, and you just feel what its story is like. Because fear is never about what's here, ever. It's always a story about what will come. It's always your imagination. And it might or it might not come, but you sit there and you listen to its story, and maybe after 20 or 50 times, at some point it comes and you say, oh, that's fear again. I know you. It's as if you make friends with it and you don't have to run away or stop doing that creative project or whatever it is that you love. You do it anyway. Wendell Berry writes, again, I go among trees and sit still, and all my stirring becomes quiet around me like circles in the water. My tasks lie in their places where I left them asleep like cattle. And then what I am afraid of comes, and I live for a while in its sight. And what I fear in it leaves it, and the fear of it leaves me. It sings, and I hear its song. So there's a kind of tenderness to this awareness that feels the frightened child or the fear that comes and says, yes, this is okay, we can sit with this, we can be with this. Having some humor as well. Judgment, part of aversion and anger is all the judgment. How many judgments? Sometimes I tell people just to start to count judgments. See in a meditation how many judgments you can count. Or in the morning, at your office or where you work or wherever it happens to be. Oh, I don't like the way that person came in today. Okay, that's 23. But I caught that judgment really fast, didn't I? I'm getting better. Oh, it's 24, right? And that's a little noisy over there. I wish that would stop 25, But just kind of keep at it and sitting there. I am getting better at this. Oh, pride, yep, 25. And you just begin to notice liking this, not liking that. The mind swings from one to another. And you can't stop it. You can't say, don't judge. I wish I wasn't judging so much. Because what's that? 26. That's right, 26. Thank you. This is from Rumi. 4 Indians enter a mosque and begin prostrations, deep, sincere praying. But a priest walks by, and one of the Indians, without thinking, forgetting the day of silence, says, oh, are you going to give the call to prayers now? Is it time? And the second Indian, under his breath, this is the day of silence. You spoke. Now your prayers are invalid. And the third one says, Uncle, don't scold him. You've done the same thing. Correct yourself. And the fourth says out loud, praise to God, I haven't made the mistake of those 3. It's just us, right? And we're so judgmental, most of us would not be allowed to sit on the bench in a civilized society. Off with their heads, no good, right? So the idea is just to begin to know fear and to know judgment, to see there's the judging mind. You can name it, judging, you can count it. Sometimes I actually have people give it names. I'll ask who in their background was their best teacher of judgment. Oh, it was Harold, my father, or it was Margaret, my mother. Say, okay, then you can thank them each time, you're sitting and meditating. They say, you're not doing it right. Say, thank you, Margaret, for your opinion. I appreciate it. I didn't realize you knew so much about meditation, right? Thanks, Harold. Right, you're not investing your money right. Thank you, Harold. Whatever it is. And you just begin to see that it's a tape that comes. Oh, there's a judgment. Thank you for your opinion. And here we are again, just in this moment. Softening to oneself, to others. The way one works with these states is to receive them with a great spaciousness of mindfulness or compassion. The only miracle is a change of heart. forgiveness for ourselves, for others. To be aware is to forgive. To be aware is to let the world back into our heart as it is. A military officer who'd just begun to try a meditation practice for stress reduction recently found himself standing in a long line at the supermarket. By nature he was impatient, and he became incensed when he noticed that the woman just ahead of him in line had only one item. She was also carrying a baby, and when she got to the checkout clerk, she stopped to chat about the child. To top it off, she handed the baby to the clerk, and they were both cooing over it, oblivious to the lengthening line. He got stiffer and more rigid, but because of his meditation, he became aware of the heat, the pressure rising in his chest, the forehead, the story, the images of what he might do, and the inner dialogue. What nerve, how selfish. As he recognized what he was doing to himself, he relaxed and paid attention to some slow, even breaths, and for the first time really looked at the baby. And finally, when it was his turn to get his groceries checked, he said to the clerk, "That was a beautiful baby." And the clerk beamed and said, "That was my baby. My husband was killed recently in a fighter plane accident, so my mother takes care of the baby now while I'm at work. She tries to come in once or twice a day so I can see him." We don't know. We get upset at so many things and we just don't know. So to be mindful and see these energies come is to accept them with some tenderness and forgiveness and not believe them all. It's really a mercy of the heart in our awareness. Third common energy sweep us away. It's the clouds of dullness and sleepiness. Sometimes it's called laziness. People will come into me who are doing meditation practice or spiritual practice and say, "I'm lazy," or "I'm lazy in my life." And I don't believe them, because it's rarely true. Almost always it's not laziness. You know what it is? Fear. People are afraid. They're afraid to sing and dance and let their creativity out. Our natural condition, our natural life is creative. And when we don't do it, it's because we're contracted and afraid. But there's a kind of sleepiness that we get into when we take our life for granted, when we don't attend to the loved ones around us, or to our garden, or to our body, or to the money that's entrusted to us, or whatever it is. There is a kind of laziness, if you will, but again, it's because we lose touch. So here comes this energy of dullness, of not paying attention, of sleepiness. I mean, my teacher, because I was very sleepy in meditation, he had me sit on the edge of the well to meditate. He said, "That might help keep you awake, Look down and feel like you're going to fall in." And sometimes you find yourself meaning to meditate, but you just don't get around to it, or falling asleep in meetings, or wanting to get out in nature and exercise, but we don't. And it's important to know that this too is just an impersonal energy. These are all like the weather. In comes wanting mind, and it goes out, and then the window is open, and then in comes the judgmental mind, and you notice it. There you are, thank you for your opinion, and it passes on. And then comes this next one, I can't do it, and don't have the time. And these are just the energies of life. So what does one do? Again, you begin to pay attention with a mindful heart. How does the body feel when you feel this lack of energy, the sleepiness or dullness or not caring for things? What does that feel like in the mind and the heart? And even in a second, it can change. It's not far away. It's in a moment of recognition. So the first thing is simply to acknowledge, oh, here's that state, and learn to recognize it, name it, bow to it. Sleepiness, loss of energy. It comes for different reasons. Sometimes sleepiness or tiredness comes because we're not used to being still. This is a culture which has so much stimulation that it starts to get a little bit quiet. We don't know what to do with it. The mind says, gee, it's quiet, it must be bedtime, because that's all it knows, right? So we kind of put ourselves to sleep if the TV isn't on and if things aren't at high volume and someone isn't, in the midst of something exciting. What is it like just to take a walk in the spring flowers? What is it like just to sit and feel our own breath as the air comes in from the window, to be aware of our own body, or to look at the people around us, or pay attention to the work or the creative things that have been given to us in a quiet and still and present way. So what we want to do is become curious. What is this life energy? Even if it's sleepiness or what we would call laziness, and begin to acknowledge its place too. And in that moment we become free. Its opposite, the fourth, is restlessness, agitation. Instead of the loss of energy, it's too much. Just begin to notice it. Because usually we move away and we turn on the TV or pick up the phone or distract ourselves when we're agitated. But here you just sit. And you notice it, the refrigerator mind that wants to get up and open the refrigerator. There it is, okay? Because I can't sit still. Or the TV mind, or whatever it is. And feel it, and make this space in the heart that can say, yes, this is another energy, and be free in the midst of it. Let the body soften and feel its energy, and if there's sadness or longing or love or grief or anger that comes with it, just let that come and go. And then you can notice it and name it. Oh, restless, restless. Just be with it. Or boredom. If you're bored or restless, terrific. Be bored. Be really bored. Let yourself, what is boredom like? Because otherwise we can't be here on this earth. If you're afraid of boredom or restlessness, and the minute you feel it, you distract yourself, you can never be still. But instead, welcome boredom. All right. Bored, bored. What is this like? Oh, it just means I'm quiet. Maybe I wasn't paying so much attention. Maybe I'm sad. Bored, bored. Or restless, restless. I can't stand it, restless. What to do? And when it's really strong, our suggestion is that you die of restlessness. You just sit there and say, all right, take me. You know? And the minute you say that, of course, it gets easier, because the problem with these states is not the states, but our identification, our resistance to them. The minute you say, all right, let me just feel how big this is. It's a storm, a whirlwind, a tornado. In a psychology class, the professor said he was going to call on one student to come to the front of the room and engage in an activity that was likely to be embarrassing to them. He said, I think I'll walk around and choose the student, and he kind of walked back and forth up and down the aisles of the class for a while. And just gave them time to imagine. And then after that, he stopped, went to the front of the room, and he said, actually, I have no intention of picking anyone. We're just beginning the study of the power of suggestion and imagination. And what was that like, you know? And people said, oh, I started to get butterflies in my stomach, and my heart was pounding. Was he going to pick me? What would he ask me to do? I imagined the worst, whatever the worst is for each of you. So a lot of this restlessness isn't what's here, but what we imagine. And so it's really to take a vacation in the heart, to say, all right, here's restlessness, and breathe a little before you answer the phone, as Thich Nhat Hanh says. Let it ring a few times. Take a few breaths and then pick the phone up. So it's just to make that space, to breathe, to rest, to calm. The wanting mind, the judgmental or angry mind, the sleepy, the restless mind, to see them and find the freedom that recognizes them for what they are and is more compassionate and greater than that. The last is the doubting mind, confusion and doubt. What is this doubt? Ajahn Chah, my teacher, said, like you're riding a horse and asking, where's the horse? You don't know where you are with doubt. And yet doubting is natural. I can't do it. It's too hard. This work that I'm doing, this project I've been given, the way I have to parent my young child or my teenager, or the sitting practice, or this relationship. I don't know how I'm going to work this out with this person. Why don't they do this? Or if only it would change, and I don't know that I can make this happen. Maybe I've taken the wrong path. You know, maybe this meditation isn't the right thing, or this relationship isn't right, or I should change my occupation. I'm too young to meditate. I should go have a good time first and then do it when I'm older. Or I'm too old to meditate. I should have done it when I was younger. It's hard, you know. Do you know the doubting mind? and how painful it is to be caught in any of these states when we believe them. So the first thing is to see it. Oh, there's the doubting mind. Thank you. You're here again. You can't do it. I appreciate your opinion. This is the wrong path. The first thing you learn in life is you're a fool, said Ray Bradbury. The last thing you learn is you're the same fool. Right? Sometimes I think I understand everything and then I regain consciousness. So the idea isn't that there won't be doubts. Doubting is natural. But that we can see the doubting mind as we see the wanting mind or the fearful mind, and that there's some graciousness of heart bigger than that. Robert Fulghum writes that in the 60s, like many Westerners, he decided to go to Japan and get enlightened. And he went to a Zen monastery, shaved his head, put on the gray robes, figured to become a pretty holy man in short order, which is the 6 weeks before my return ticket was up. But of course it was not to be. Sitting gave me hallucinations and cramps, but not enlightenment. The food gave me diarrhea. Sleeping on a board gave me a backache. And my fellow monks treated me like a Western fool, laughing behind my back. It was one of those times when you know enough to realize there's something everybody knows but you don't know enough to know exactly what it is. Anyway, time came for me to leave, and the great Roshi of the temple, famous master, invited me to come and see him, wise, respected. After I was ushered into his private study, we knelt and bowed in mutual respect, he out of courtesy, I out of awe. For a long time he sat, looking directly at me. Then very deliberately he shifted his weight to one knee, and just as deliberately reached for his backside and scratched himself in a way that your mother told you was not polite in public. I have hemorrhoids. They hurt and they itch. There was nothing in my mental manual about Zen to give me how I should reply to such an opening remark. I kept my mouth shut and pretended to be thoughtful. The hemorrhoids come from stress, you know, from worrying about tourists burning down this fire trap of a temple, from worrying about trying to get enough funding from businessmen to keep it in repair, and from arguing with my wife and children who are not as holy as I am, he smiled. And from despairing over the quality of the lazy young fools who want to be priests nowadays. Sometimes I think I would like to get a little place in Hawaii and just play golf for the rest of my life. He leaned to one side and scratched himself again. It was this way before I was enlightened, you know, and now it is the same after enlightenment. We sat silently, giving time for his words to sink in, then he motioned me to follow. And in the alcove before I was to leave was a long, ancient scroll of calligraphy. He sent me home where he felt I had been a thirsty man looking for a drink all the while standing knee-deep in a flowing stream, and read the scroll to me. There is really nothing you must be, and there's nothing you must do. There's really nothing you must have, and there's nothing you must know. There's really nothing you must become. However, it helps to understand that fire burns, and when it rains, the earth gets wet. Whatever you do, he smiled, there are consequences. Nobody is exempt. And then he winked and bowed and walked away. So we all have doubts. The doubting mind comes as the wanting mind or the angry mind, and none of these are problems or things to get rid of. They are the place of practice itself. They are the place of enlightenment. In fact, they're what brings life to practice. Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche called them manure for Bodhi. They're the stuff that makes enlightenment alive and rich. And they fertilize compassion and patience and letting go. Where else are we going to learn our lessons but from these states? As each one comes, you could almost ask, what's the lesson in this one? Desire comes, and if we listen really deeply, maybe it is underneath all of that a longing for wholeness. It's not the little desires. As one of my teachers said, your problem is not that you desire so much, but that you don't desire enough. Why not want it all? Complete fulfillment and wholeness in every moment. So desire has a lesson for us. Fear isn't a bad thing. I think of fear as a little flashing light that says, about to grow. It's kind of the membrane between what we think we can do and what's possible. And when fear comes, it says, oops, about to grow again. Oh, I don't know if I want to grow this way. Or anger. It teaches us something about seeing what's true and yet still remaining compassionate, or forgiveness. Sleepiness, it begins to tell you about your body, to take care of yourself. In Buddhism, it's honored. It's called the poor man's nirvana. You know, there's a value to it. It teaches us about not resisting life, like Zen Master Ryokan. For more than 70 years, I've been making myself dizzy observing men. I've finally abandoned trying to penetrate their good and bad actions. All this coming and going is a sign of weakness. The great way, I braid spring flowers into a ball. The future, if a visitor brings these questions, I have only the tranquility of the hermitage to offer. It's fine to sleep, to rest, to stretch out your feet, to sit down, just to be where we are, to honor this life, not by doing, but by being. Or pride, puffed up, see how good I am. Usually when I feel that, I feel very small. There's this little boy in there that's saying, see how good I'm doing, Mom or Dad or whatever. But somewhere in there, even in that pride, is this longing that seeks for true goodness, that wants to be beautiful. So then all these, in the wanting, want fully, want life completely. See it clearly. Allow for this. These very forces make for a great and wise heart when we can see them for what they are. Rest in unmoving suchness. If desire or fear arise, they are false. Allow them to come and go as they will, but hold to nothing, and you will discover what is true. It's from Zen Master Shunhua. They're a play of energy. What Ramana Maharshi was asked, he said, why is there evil in the world? When he was asked, he said, to thicken the plot, make it interesting. I mean, think about it for a moment. What movies do you go to? Would you go to a movie and just watch somebody sit and meditate on the screen, you know, or a movie of just a nice green field with cows eating and some flowers in it and the wind blowing? Would you buy a ticket for that? You like a plot, don't you? We actually like that stuff. Just don't believe it too much. Because when we believe it, we get caught and we suffer and we create the suffering of separation for everyone else. To see it and know it for what it is, our humanity, our longing and sorrow and strength and joy, and rest in our Buddha nature. Allow the heart to discover this natural freedom in every realm is the purpose of these teachings or this practice. Don't think these are small things. This is really a great task we're asked to do. Without understanding, greed and anger and fear, doubt and restlessness, all of these things, they make a terrible world for us as human beings. So someone needs to understand them. Each of us does. And then there's a possibility for a real beauty in the midst of wherever we find ourselves. Reflect for a moment. Which of these energies most commonly comes to you? Judgment or anger, wanting mind or fear, doubt, confusion. And when you get your answer, imagine what it would be like to recognize it when it arises as a friend and say, oh, here you are again, I know you. To make your heart and mind spacious, much bigger than that energy, and allow it to sing its song without being lost in it.